So this is how to get Charlie Hunter-ish sounds on a Boss Octave OC5. I'm also going to go through some of the problems with it as well, where it's not quite perfect. I'd just like to say I'm not Charlie Hunter, and I only dabble a little bit. So that was a walking bass line thing with some chords, counterpoint on it. So what I've got here is we're just on the poly setting, and I have a cutoff so that I can play. Have the low strings going through the octave, and then the output from with the octave goes to a burying a keyboard amp, but it's like a PA. It's kind of doubling as a bass amp, and then the dry sound is going to a deluxe reverb. The chorusy bit that you can hear, that's TC7 up, just kind of like mainly octave up with some chorus, just to kind of separate between the bass and the high bits a little bit. And it's got that the 7 up has like some fast chorus to make it kind of sound organy, kind of like what Charlie Hunter does. So I'll play that again. So yeah, that's kind of the kind of thing you can do. So on the octave, the OC5, we have just the octave down. There's no octave up because we just want the bass line. But you can hear there are some problems. So if I just play just like the bass line, you can also hear that the dry sound also has the bass notes, but obviously at regular guitar octave, guitar pitch. So this is not working like a crossover. So you still get some guitar sound when you're playing the bass sound. So ideally, you'd want something like a complete crossover, so that you have the low strings going one way and the high strings going the other way, rather than just the low strings going to the bass amp, but then the low strings and the high strings going to the guitar amp. But if you hear the higher notes, it's mainly the guitar signal. But I don't know if you notice where I'm near that sort of crossover point. There is a touch of bass in that too, which is part of the issue with this sort of crossover. It's not as steep, so you don't get that like absolute cutoff between it. Now, I'm not sure if you had something like the Electro-Harmonix Bass 9, whether that cutoff is sharper, but I haven't tried that. I've only tried this so far. I'm also dabbling with the idea of actually getting a dedicated crossover, because then you could send just the bass notes somewhere and just the high notes. The other issue is, and some people say this online too, is that when you use this control, the low notes are quote unquote sort of not as loud, or they sound weak. And that's what I found as well. I have to have the bass amp much louder, the keyboard amp much louder than if I was going to send a direct signal to there, or if I didn't have the crossover and I was just sending the bass there without the crossover, the bass signal is a lot stronger. So some people talk about that online, and some people said the OC3 is actually better for that than the OC5. But yeah, it means like the bass amp needs to be really loud, because you're losing a lot of signal, especially as you get closer to this crossover. But even on the low notes, those are weaker than if you weren't running that. And I also tried running on the lowest signal, but because when you're doing kind of like, which is fine if you're playing chords where you're playing all the notes at the same time, as you're playing the high notes at the same time as you're playing the low notes, it seems to detect the which is the lowest note and only send that to the octave. But if you're playing single notes, you hear it was sending those to the bass note, the bass amp. So it doesn't detect like the low strings, it detects the lowest note that you're playing at that moment. And so if you're playing a single line thing, it's going to send it to the bass amp, which is not what you want if you're playing kind of well, Charlie Hunter stuff, but any kind of thing where you really want to separate the bass signal, and likewise, if you're counterpointing, like you might want to do between the, whoops, it's still sending those bass notes, or at least the bass note of whatever chord you're playing, to the bass amp, because you're not playing it exactly the same time as you're playing that low note, and you may be like staccatoing the bass note. So I couldn't use it on that lower setting. I had to find the crossover point, which I think was about there. Where I had to find the crossover point where it was singing the notes that I want to play to the bass section. But yeah, you can't use that kind of lowest note setting, which I thought you could use. Yeah, as I said, I've thought about getting the Electro-Harmonix Bass 9, but I think that still sends, when you do this split thing on that split setting on that, I think it still sends the dry signal to the guitar amp for those low strings, so you don't get like complete separation. So I might just do the crossover thing. I found one on Reverb, so I'll put the link to a small crossover in the link below too. The other thing I thought I'd say, is that the bass sounds pretty good. Like, to me, through a bass amp, some people say, oh, you're just getting like a synth sound, or you're just getting like a sine wave sound to the bass amp. But to me, it sounds okay. It sounds fine. So I don't know if this works for you, then I don't know how much better it is getting an EHX, an Electro-Harmonix Bass 9, because you still don't get that complete separation, which means I might try a crossover and then put the crossover through, say, the sub and up, which I already have, to just get that bass note. Because of the way that the range control kind of isn't, the Q or something isn't that sharp, so you don't get a complete cut across, and you still get the dry going out. I'm not sure if the Bus OC5 is for me either, and I'm not sure if it's that much, because again, you have that dry out, the lower strings going through the dry out on Electro-Harmonix, and it's more expensive. I'm not sure if that's the right thing for me, but if this kind of gets you close. But if this video helps somebody decide that they want to do it this way, or they don't want to do it this way, I hope it helps. Thanks.